Hi, welcome back to our almost what is our final day of what I call Clarity Week. And today we're going to be talking about the final KPI, which is proposal to close or recommendation to close. And this is where we see if what we have done throughout the sales process is going to come to fruition, if it's going to be effective, if we've done everything that we need to do to bring the customer over to our side and demonstrate our value. So, before we get into that, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Leah. I am a sales advisor and sales coach for AEs and sales teams, and I help them if they are frustrated by lowering win rates, inconsistent quota attainment, and unpredictable revenue. And the organizations and the AEs that I've worked with, we've been able to increase their win rate by an average of 25% and also increase their quota attainment by an average of about 35% within about 90 days. So that's a little bit about me. This is what I do. If you are interested in that, if you're interested in working with me or just having a conversation, feel free to DM me on LinkedIn and we can have that conversation. Okay, so let's get back into Clarity Week. We're getting into our recommendation to close KPI. Before we get into that, why we're calling this Clarity Week, right? And the reason is because a lot of times throughout the sales process, we're just launching into the sales process. We're launching into this selling cycle, and we're not really clear on what we need to do in order to have success, in order to bring those deals to close, but not also, only that, in order to show our buyers the value and help them solve their problems or identify problems that they didn't know existed or be able to see what's going to come down the pike, right? So part of our job as sellers, as sales consultants, as AEs, is to help our buyers what I call see around corners. And I got that from Lee Levitt. So thank you, Lee, for that. But that's part of our job, is to help them anticipate some of the issues, help them head it off if we can, and show how our product, solution, or service can help do that. So we're calling this Clarity Week because we first have to get clarity on what we're doing, the problem we're solving, who we serve, and all of that before we even start selling our thing. Okay, so that's why we're calling it Clarity. We're getting clear on the KPIs. We're going to get clear on the activities. So in a couple days' time, we're going to talk about leading and lagging indicators and activities and how to figure that out. But this is Clarity Week, and that's why I call it that, right? Because not all of us have clarity on what we're supposed to do, who we serve, and all of these things that's going to lead to having success at the end of the month, end of the quarter, end of the year. Okay, so let's get into the recommendation to close KPI. And remember, a couple days ago, I said that we're not calling it a proposal, right? Because that sounds a little bit more passive. We're talking about becoming trusted advisors and presenting ourselves as such. And so we are calling it a recommendation because if we're consulting with our buyer or our client, we are going to recommend the best path forward for them to fix the issues, be able to head off issues in the future, and be able to set them up for success. And that means in the buyer's world, either we're helping them increase their revenues or helping them cut their expenses or a combination of both, or maybe solving some operational problems, depending on what you're selling. Okay, so we're calling it a recommendation. So, recommendation to close KPI. This is really super simple, and it really is the number of the number of recommendations that lead to a close. So, of all the recommendations that you've sent, all the recommendations that you've done, how many of those are actually closing? How many are leading to a closed won deal, right? If you're in Salesforce. So let's say you have done 10 recommendations during the week, and you had 4 that actually closed where the buyer signed. They say, yeah, I see the value, they sign. That's a 40% conversion rate. That's pretty typical and it's okay. But depending on how your sales cycle goes and your skill level, I'm here to tell you, you can do a lot better than 40%. Okay. So if you get to the end of the week, end of the month, or end of the quarter, and your conversion rate with this KPI is 40% or below, then that means we need to go back and look at what we did from beginning to the end of the sales cycle and see where we might have dropped the ball, right? So if we go back to our sports, our football analogy, when we're presenting and we've done our recommendation, whether or not the client signs is, did we fumble the ball on the 5 yard line? Are we fumbling? Are we having a lot of incomplete passes at that point? Or are we able to make the completions? Are we able to run into the end zone, which signifies a touchdown, which is a closed deal, right? So think of it that way, right? And again, everything that we do within the sales cycle, whether it seems obvious or not, is either going to get us closer to a closed one deal or it's going to get us further away. So it's going to either get us further away from the end zone or we're going to launch into the end zone and make that score. So here's what we want to track. We want to track our proposal or recommendation to close conversion rate. We're also going to track our average time from when we actually do the recommendation to the actual close. So, how long is that time between when we made the recommendation and when the client signed? And we're going to look at trends in terms of deal size. Okay, so what I mean by this is we're going to look at the average deal size or the deal size that we normally close and we're working with. And we're going to say, okay, what is our conversion rate from the time we present the recommendation to the time the client signs or doesn't based on the deal size? Are larger deals taking longer? Are larger deals falling through the cracks? Or conversely, on the flip side, am I selling a transactional, what I call transactional product, solution, or service, and are those falling through the cracks more often? Right? Are they taking longer? Are they just being ghosted? Right? Is the buyer it kind of like, okay, well, I can take it or leave it? Are those deals not being closed? How long is it taking? Right? Because what often happens is if you're not in a complex buy cycle, it's not enterprise or something or mid market or something like that. What happens in our minds as the sellers is we take it for granted that all we have to do is present a price. We have to have a couple of conversations, and oh, it's transactional, so it's not a big deal. I'm just going to present my price. Well, those are the ones, if you really think about it, those are the ones that can make or break your quota. Or if you're already at quota, if you close a few transactional deals and you just take a little bit more time, those are the ones that can push you over that 100% attainment rate if you are there. And I'm going to assume you are because you guys are great sellers, you know what you're doing, right? But my point is, don't take a transactional quote unquote sale for granted. Put some more time into it, slow it down, find out what is important to the buyer, what your competition looks like, all of these things. So when we're considering the recommendation to close KPI and that conversion rate, we want to consider more than just how many close. It's how long did it take, and we're going to consider it by deal size or market segment, right? So are certain market segment take longer? Does a certain market segment just fall through the cracks, right? Do they just not happen? All of this is data that we need to be able to improve later on down the line. But again, just like with all the KPIs that we talked about, if we don't measure it and we're not aware of it, then we can improve it. And sometimes it just falls completely out of our line of sight. It falls completely out of our vision. And we just say, oh, well, that didn't close, that didn't close, that didn't close. And we're not improving, we're not tracking, right? So we can't get better and we can't diagnose what's happening there. So we want to take a look at all the numbers and we want to be cognizant of what's closing and what's not, why, what it looks like, what the deal is what it contains, and all the details. We want to really be cognizant of that. So those are some things to track, and that's what we need to do at the end of every week when we close deals or when we lost the deal. We want to take a look at that conversion rate and segment out those things and figure out what we can fix and what we can affect. Okay. So what does good look like by industry? So the other day we talked about tech, SaaS, and manufacturing. That's what I specialize in. So if you're a rep in those fields, or if you're a sales leader and you need to up level your team's performance, please feel free to DM me. We can have that conversation about KPIs and other things. So here are some industry benchmarks. For tech and SaaS, a proposal to close rate, a recommendation to close rate is about 25 to 35%. That's pretty strong. Again, we can do better if we know what we're doing throughout the sales cycle when it comes to the prospecting, especially the qualification, the discovery, and all of these things. Remember that the close rate is a culmination of, and it's indicative of whatever we did or didn't do throughout the sales process. Okay, so tech and SaaS, 25 to 35% is average, is pretty strong depending on what you're selling. In manufacturing, we're looking at 35 to 45%, maybe even 50%. And I will say up to about 50% in consulting too. And why are those differences, right? So here's a huge difference. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story of why manufacturing close rates tend to be a lot higher, and also consulting rates tend to be a lot higher. I used to work in consulting sales, okay? And I worked in consulting sales for about 2.5 years, and it was safety consulting, right? So, in a nutshell, it's, I was working with high risk businesses, so like oil and gas, mining, these types of things, utilities, where if something went wrong, something went boom, and people, are injured, they may not go home to their families, they could be dismembered, these types of things. So really, really bad ramifications if things on site weren't proper, and if the safety culture wasn't where it needed to be. So as a result of that, as a result of the risk, and as a result of having people physically involved, machinery involved, these types of things, we tended to be very in tune with our buyer's business, right? So there was none of this. It's a transactional sale. We were always talking to the leaders, talking to the manufacturing sites, the supervisors, and so forth that were on site. We were talking to the employees. So by the end of that cycle, we knew their business really, really well. And also by the end of the cycle, they very well knew that we could solve their problem, and they would sign on the dotted line more often than not. But it was a consequence of really doing a great job in discovery and really getting down and dirty in the client's business and knowing their business and forging a relationship with them. So that is why industries like manufacturing, sales, and consulting sales tend to have a higher than average close rate, because they know their clients' businesses, and it's a matter of course where you need to be very involved, and you need to walk hand in hand with that leader, with that manufacturing site. I worked with a company. It was a global CPG company. If I told you the name, you would know who they were. They had multiple manufacturing sites throughout the US, North America, Asia, and Europe, right? So we got to know a lot of their business and a lot of their people that were on site. So we ended up closing that deal. That was about over $1 million over a couple of years. So that's just an example of what a manufacturing sales cycle could look like. And those close rates tend to be higher than normal, higher than tech or SaaS. And we could actually, if we're in SaaS, we can actually take a page from that, from consulting sales and manufacturing sales, and do a little bit better when it comes to forging the relationship, creating the emotion, understanding what's at risk for the client, and understanding their business and what we can contribute and what happens if they don't solve their problem, right? So we can take a page from that and just understand that and implement it. Okay. So one of the things that I see happen often is we're sending proposals. Number one, we're sending them prematurely. So before we understand the problem environment, before we can articulate the cost of inaction, right? So that would be the COI, and that has a dollar amount, and it also has a time factor involved. So we're sending, our proposals prematurely, without understanding that and without articulating that. So in other words, what we need to do when we find out all these things, the ROI, the COI, all of these things, we need to be able to connect the dots in our recommendation to increase the chances that we're going to be able to close that deal. In a lot of cases, we're just not doing that. The recommendation of the proposal is too vague. It's not showing exactly what's happening now in the business, what the ramifications are, and how our solution, product, or service is going to fix it or eliminate it. Okay, we're not doing that, so we're sending the proposal prematurely. We want to ensure that whatever we send, we are enabling executive alignment. So the executives that we're talking to understand that this is how it's going to affect their business, that it's going to solve a problem that is either financial, operational, or has something to do with customer experience, customer retention, something along these lines. Okay, so we want to make sure that our recommendation is showing all those things, and we want to make sure that our decision makers are aligned and that the executives in the organization are also aligned. Okay, and this is whether it's a complex sale or not. It doesn't matter. Again, if we are in a transactional sales cycle, we still need to stop taking it for granted that all we need to do is present a price and it's going to be quick, fast, and in a hurry, because that kills our conversion rate and it also hampers our quota attainment, right? And even if you're at 100%, like I said before, if you're at 100%, imagine if you can take your quota attainment to 125% or even 135, 150%, right? I'm working with an AE now. He's President's Club, and we've been able to increase his quota attainment by 15, 20%, just because we're working on all these things that we're talking about. And there's greater awareness when it comes to not only just tracking the KPIs, but understanding what's happening in each step so that we can impact the KPIs, knowing what we have to change, knowing what we have to fix or adjust, right? And this is a continual process. Okay, so how are we going to fix or adjust this recommendation to close KPI? How are we going to fix it? Number one, we're going to understand that we're not sending a recommendation prematurely. We are going to know that we have to have solved the problem, articulated that problem. We have to get agreement that this is an issue and that it's a priority with the client, and be able to connect the dots for them, like I said before. And then and only then are we doing a recommendation. Okay, because if think of yourself as a consultant, because that's what we really are, right? We're talking about consultative sales. So think if you're a consultant and you're not connecting the dots for people. You're not connecting the dots for people. You're just saying, okay, this is the overall vague problem, and this is how much it costs. This is what we're going to do. This is implementation. That's not going to land because it's not complete, and we don't have complete visibility to all the components. Therefore, how can we articulate this to our buyer and have them buy in or sign off on it? We cannot. So let's understand and tighten up our proposal readiness criteria or our recommendation readiness criteria. This could be two or three things that, if not present, we're going to back up. We're going to ask for more information so that we can present a complete proposal / recommendation that connects the dots and helps them understand what's going to happen if and when they buy our product, solution, or service. Okay? We want to make sure that the business problem and the impact are well defined. Again, if we don't have a business problem, if we don't have the impact of that problem on the business with financials, operations, customer experience, customer turnover, something like this, it's dead. It's not going anywhere, because you got to think that your buyer is always also talking to 10 other sellers and probably getting recommendations and has a stack of proposals on their desk, recommendations on their desk, and they all look the same, except for yours, right? Because if you do what I'm saying, yours is going to look different. And in a minute, I'm going to show you how to present it differently so that your recommendation doesn't go in the same pile. Okay, we're calling this the same pile because they all look the same. We're going to make sure your proposal, your recommendation doesn't go here, end up here, right? Where it just ends up being you're competing on price or features, and then you're trapped in that hell where, it's you against somebody else, and then we get into discounting and all that. So there's that. We want to make sure that we simplify our recommendation so that it's brief, it summarizes the problem, summarizes the fix, how you're going to fix it, and that you articulated the value through the proposal, and again, or the recommendation. And excuse me, it's more than I can go into here, but in a nutshell, you want to make sure that you're brief, that you outline the issues, that you have shown the value, and that you are connecting the dots, and you're not leaving anything to the imagination. And why do I say that? Because when we're sending recommendations, proposals, okay, if it looks overly complicated, or they have to think about it, or they have to read it two or three or four times to understand it, they're going to be confused. And there's a saying in sales, and this is so true: the confused mind does nothing. So in the buyer's world, nothing means either they're going to stay with the status quo, or you go back into the same pile with everybody else, and they do the obvious thing, is compare a price. Even if your product, solution, or service is superior, and you know it is, and you can demonstrate it, if you haven't done that, this is where you're going to end up. And it's either going to be close loss, they're going to push it month to month to month, or something like that, and then your sales cycle is long and there's all these issues. Okay, so we're going to shorten it, we're going to simplify it, we're going to make it shorter, we're going to make it cleaner. We don't have all these crazy graphics on the recommendation. It's just very, very simple. Okay. Um, Again, our proposal, our recommendation needs to speak to the ROI, return on investment, COI, some kind of cost efficiency, maybe even improving the customer's margin. Okay. And this is something that a lot of us, especially in tech, even in manufacturing, like if I think about it, we don't do a great job of, right? So we got to articulate what's it costing them if they don't, and how are we going to help them if they do? What are the cost savings that they're going to realize? And what is the one thing that if they do it, it's going to catapult them to the next level of revenue, or they're going to cut their expenses more, right? So these are the things that you want to think of when you're putting together a recommendation. Again, please don't rush through this, because if you fumble a ball on the 3 yard line when you're about to get in the end zone, then you got to go back about 25 more yards and you got a lot more work to do. And that is only going to do one or two things. It's going to prolong the sales cycle longer than it needs to, which means the revenue for the organization is delayed. And it also means your quota is also delayed with you fulfilling that, your quota, and making that, right? So we want to make sure that we do it right the first time so that we can get the ball over the line into the end zone. That's the deal. Okay. So we are going to, when we look at our the conversion rate, we're going to look at all the components, right? Did we do a good job in discovery? What was missing if we didn't, right? If we look at our, once we put together our recommendation, if we look at it, does it make sense? Are we connecting the dots? And if there's stuff missing, then we want to address it, and we need to ask our buyer questions. Okay. Which leads me to the last point. The number one thing that I see buyers do wrong when it comes to proposals and recommendations: we are putting it together and then we're emailing the client the recommendation. That is a mistake. And ideally, we want to present each and every recommendation, if it's not in person, on Zoom, right? We want to have that meeting with the client to present our recommendation. Why do we want to do that? Because when we're shooting it off into email, if something is unclear, or they have a question about it, or we were wrong about something, or we needed clarity about something in the recommendation, then by the time they get it, they're making all kinds of inferences already. And they might not even ask you. They might not even tell you, "Hey, this is unclear," or "Hey, this stat was wrong," or "This number was wrong. Therefore, our entire recommendation may be off." You might not even get that chance. You probably won't. Because why? They have 10 other recommendations in the pile that they can go to. And if they can figure it out, they're going to go with those. Or if they're confused, they might not do anything. So this is why we do not want to send recommendations or proposals, whatever you want to call them, by email. We always want to set another call to present the recommendation and to discuss it. And we want it to be a collaborative process, right? And what does this look like? When you are presenting your recommendation, you're having your recommendation on the screen, you're sharing your screen, and then you're going through, you're presenting, and you're validating everything that's in the recommendation. And if something is wrong, they can just tell you, hey, this number needs to be adjusted, or this is not exactly it, and so forth and so on. And then you can have that conversation, and then we're clearing up any misconceptions or any confusion before they occur. When you send a recommendation off by email, you have lost complete control. And if I really think about it, 90% of the AEs and sales teams that I work with are doing this until I get a hold of them. So if you're doing this, it's not your fault because you probably haven't been taught, and you probably haven't been taught the correct way to do a recommendation or to present it, or even to how to tee it up, right? So it's not your fault, but now you know better. Never email a recommendation if you can help it. Always present it live in person, and that gives you another reason at the previous step when you're doing your presentation and they're okay with it, and they're like, okay, what's the next step? Okay, the next step is a recommendation. I'm going to put all this information together. What date next week or at the end of the week is good for you? And then you'll sync calendars. You'll do that. The recommendation is already on their calendar. They agree to it, and then you just present, right? That is how you maintain control, but also it's how you do a gut check and a quality check on your work. And it's a collaborative process, right? You and your buyer are working together to fine tune the recommendation or the proposal. And again, if this is something that you need help with, if this is something you know you're not doing as an AE, or if you're a sales leader and you know your organization is not doing it, I can help you tee up the entire sales process. And again, all of this assumes that you have a sales process that makes sense and you know your KPIs, you know everything. So if you don't know, feel free to DM me. We can have that conversation. But you don't want to relinquish control by sending your recommendations by email. Like, don't do that because you are unintentionally lowering your conversion rate. And even if you're at 60% and you're emailing your recommendations, if you're already at 60%, that says you're doing most stuff right. You can tweak it and fine tune it. You could bump it up at either 10% or 15% more than 60% if you present in person. Okay, this is how powerful not emailing your recommendation or proposal over to the client is. Okay, and later tips on how to do that and what it looks like and everything like that. But for now, the takeaway is stop emailing proposals / recommendations. Make sure you're setting the next call, an appointment to do that, to present it, and make it a collaborative process with your buyer so that you're not only solidifying the relationship, but you are also showing them that you're problem solving with them, you're interested in their business, and you want to make it better. And that your product, solution, or service is the way forward to be able to do that. Okay? So that is it for our recommendation to close KPI. Again, we're going to track how many, we're going to track what the deal size is, what it's constituted of, what all went into it, so that we can understand the different areas that we have to improve, adjust, make better, etc. But one simple way, again, that you can increase that conversion rate, the recommendation to close conversion rate right off the bat, is by doing your recommendation presentation in person. Do not send it by email. Okay, so that's all I have for today. I hope this was helpful. Again, if you're an AE, you want me to coach you one-to-one or just have that discussion, DM me here on LinkedIn. And if you're a sales leader, I do have a strategic sales audit that audits 9 strategic areas of your sales organization's business. And I can do a 15-minute call with you to give you a path forward to improve that and help your sales team become more effective in 2026. Okay, so thank you for being here. Really, really excited to bring this content to you. Next time, we're going to be talking about activity levels, leading and lagging indicators, and how we can fix those and measure those if those are not already in place. Okay. So thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. Again, Leah Borges, sales advisor to AEs, sales leaders, and sales teams. And I will see you later.